It was having a therapist. I also went to deal with like other issues that came up in terms of I went to a food coach. I had group coaching around body image. Like everything was related. So I used my money, to answer your question, to invest in supports to free me holistically. So I invested in being well, right? So my wellness became a priority. I aligned my spending to that. I aligned, not just my habits, but how I spent my time to the things that I wanted to get better and improve upon.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing the life you think you have to settle for. Let these conversations be your guide. And guess what? You don't even have to take notes because we do that for you through our newsletter called Next Nuggets that's delivered to your email inbox every single Wednesday. There, we share takeaways, key takeaways from this episode, and outline the steps you can take today to get you from where you are to where you want to be. All you have to do is sign up. Go to nextbestthingpodcast.com or check the show notes for a link to sign up. So our guest today is Kara Stevens, but you may know her better as the Frugal Feminista. That's right. She is a financial educator, speaker, and author. We met on the internet. Literally, Kara would somehow found my posts on LinkedIn and would comment. That led to her sending me an email. And then we got on a virtual call and just clicked. It was a good kiki, just literally made my whole day. Sidebar, I keep meeting people through LinkedIn, like amazing women that I'm partnering with in different ways. And it really just shows me that if you build a thing and if you put yourself out there, your tribe will come. This conversation is evidence of that. So, our conversation with Kara, it kind of went a little bit differently than I thought it would in the best way possible. We cover so much ground in this conversation. First, we're talking about how Kara and her whole family, her husband and her child, moved to Ghana 6 months ago. How she first, though, had to tackle her debt, tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Most of it was student loans. But what struck me the most really was Kara's holistic approach to wellness that impacted her finances in a positive way. So many times when we talk about money, it's like, okay, do this with your money, do that with your money. That's not the conversation we're having here. It's about how she had to shift her mindset and the things that she did to get better in other areas of her life and how that impacted her bottom line. And it really ultimately made her current situation that she's in right now a reality. As I said, this conversation is we go there and it's so incredibly insightful. It is a conversation that I won't forget. And I'm not going to delay it further. So get into it. Here's Kara. Kara, I am so happy the internet brought us together. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, likewise.
I was thinking about how we should start because there's so much that I want to touch on with you. Your story is incredible, but I want to start to you moving to Ghana. I know you're back home in New York for a visit, but you have officially moved to Ghana. Why did you want to move away? What does that signify to you?
That's such a multi-layered question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll first start with quality of life. I would say that given our political climate, given my own personal values in terms of how I view the world, and also my husband is also from Ghana, an opportunity to return to Africa, the continent that those in diaspora were taken from without our permission, is a very full circle moment in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Going back as a Black person to a Black place could be considered spiritual, but also going back to Africa as an African American, or I'm a first generation American from Antigua, has its benefits in terms of the ability to build the generational wealth that a lot of us talk about building here but having difficulties doing so. And
Mhm.
I think that's a big piece of the conversation that is an important one that may be in the margins of how do we build Black wealth. Part of that could be either relocating or having two homes, one in the States and one on the continent, to make better use of the dollar, and being able to negotiate what that means for you in other ways. And what I mean by that is culturally, being able to be bicultural, being able to understand the world through two lenses, and being able to feel the feels of what it means to be both or to be exposed to both. So that's one big reason. The
Mhm.
second big reason was that, and almost related, was that I had achieved a level of financial independence because of the work that I had done on my job and in building the Frugal Feminista on the side. I know there's a lot of narrative and also consider it noise on the internets where they say that, your job can't build your wealth. Says who?
You're
If
right.
you use it right, right? And I think savings can't build you wealth. Says who? You know, it's one of the cornerstones of building wealth is using your income to buy assets, spending less than you make, and being able to grow a business on the side. So it was being able to use my job to become debt free, get out of student loan debt, $65,000 of it plus the credit card debt, and then saving my income and negotiate. Well, I couldn't negotiate for more, but moving up in my career to become a school administrator, and then still living as if I were a teacher, plus growing a side business that was making zero money the first couple of years. Actually, it was taking money, but persevering over 10 years
Mhm.
allowed me to reach a number where I could say, though I loved the Frugal Feminista and I loved the idea of full time entrepreneurship, the way my mind worked was that it had to be a very grounded decision, and it had to be grounded in data, and that data was numbers and money. And so the idea to pursue the Frugal Feminista full time came as a result of being able to build a financial framework that allowed me to take more risks, that allowed me to move. And to the first point is, the money there would also allow me to have more opportunities, but also, even in terms of lifestyle, live a different lifestyle than New York. And what I mean by that is have a larger home, have more support, and still be able to use and still be able to live within even like a smaller budget than I do in the States. And then finally, it's a long question,
No, this is
and it's all
great.
connected. It's all very connected. Is that I
Yeah.
have a very beautiful chocolatey daughter, and one of the reasons that I was very excited about moving to Ghana as an educator was that I feel like in the United States, Black girls are tracked in general. But then when it comes to how society, even in our own community, views Black girls, it's either you're the fast one sexually or you're the
Mhm.
smart one. So you either hold up in the corner having books and no kind of social life, or you're kind of relegated to being this highly social and highly sexual is implied life, even at an early age. And I felt that both were incomplete. And what I felt the best way to a full life was to be both social and to have and to be challenged as a scholar. And I felt that opportunities where my daughter would be in school, where she would also have opportunities to be social, to date and to be dated, to desire and be desired, isn't something that was easy for me to find in the States. So you would either have schools that maybe she'll be the minority in, but there'll be lots of great academics, or schools where she may be the majority, but the academics wouldn't be there. And I wanted her to have a full experience. And so that was one of the larger reasons that kind of motivated me to be like, this could actually work, where she could have a life where she's just a regular, degular, schmegular Black
Mhm.
girl. And that was very compelling to me.
I love how you answer that because that really perfectly framed
Yeah.
our whole conversation. We'll start
Yeah.
with the last bit because I found that to be profound and
Yeah.
really never consider that or really never hear that in this conversation of the Blaxit is what, so many people are
Yeah.
calling it. It's just that there's so many Black folks who are now moving abroad because
Right.
um, of all the whole situation here in America. And that's,
Yeah.
layered. But what has it done for you and your family to be there? Is there something that you didn't plan for that has been, I guess, to your spirit, especially kind of living
Hmm.
in Ghana? How long have you lived there, first of all?
It's been about 6 months now.
About 6 months. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
there something in terms of how you move now that maybe you didn't account for um, that has been a real benefit of the move?
Yes, there's so many different ways, and not in the ways that you may think. I would say that being away from the structures of the US, including having a job that's a 9 to 5, was a huge change. It was a welcome change, but it also came with it just more time to be with my thoughts and more time to think about what I used to think when it came to like how I wrap my identity with work. And so my relationship with work has shifted a bit. Initially, I used to have, working as a vice principal and also having the Frugal Feminista. I thought that moving to Ghana, I would just have more time because I let go of the 9 to 5. But the way I had been conditioned, I just worked more on the Frugal Feminista. And that was a
Mhm.
huge eye opener to me, was that I can't be bringing the old into the new in terms of that mindset. But it gave me the opportunity to see the information and see that I was still putting in as many hours, even though I said that I wanted to work less or have more of a rhythm or more of a flow. That was one thing. The second thing was that understanding my relationship, or even thinking about African Americans' relationship with the continent, has expanded for me. A lot of times I used to think that in having Black folk come back to the continent, that the way in which that you would be embraced by other Ghanaians was a key part of the acclimating process. And that's still important, but I don't think it's as much of an impact that you would think. And what I mean by that is, what I've come to observe is that the fact that you're Black, you get to be on the continent. Like, you don't need anyone's permission. And I think that's a huge thing psychologically for African Americans, where we feel that we have this double consciousness, like Du Bois talks about, that we have this, we're in this world where we're not wanted in the States, and we're kind of disconnected from this world on the continent. But in my experience, what I've seen is that people whose parents are Ghanaian but maybe grew up in Belgium, or whose parents are Ghanaian but grew up in England, they too, depending on their level and desire to make more connections, may or may not feel connected to Ghana in the same way that African Americans 400 years have felt. So, what that let me know is that a generation and a connection can be created and mended in a short period of time, and it could also be lost in a short period of time. So if you ever considered moving to the continent, but your main fear was that, I don't know, I won't be accepted, or I don't know the culture. I mean, culture, I think, is a skill that can be learned. You can learn
Mhm.
how to cook, the foods, you can learn how to speak the language. And so if that was ever something that you considered as a huge barrier, I feel that my experience and my observations, you don't need anyone's permission to come back to Africa. And I think the third thing, and is related, is that you're enough as you are. Your version of African American is an African version, right? So
Yeah.
whether it is the hip hop, or the Nike Dunks, or the Mambo sauce from DC, or the jazz, or whatever, or the the literature that we've created, that's African and it's American. So no one gets to dictate how African you are. The fact that you are means that you are. So I feel those are some of the things that have been very liberating for me, to be proud of who I am and the nuance of being a global citizen, more or less.
Ooh, so many great points. We're just going to pause really quickly, though. And can I ask you a big favor? Can you please hit the subscribe button? Not only will it ensure that you never miss another episode, it will help get this great content in front of more people. Our goal over here is to help as many people as possible live the life that they design. So if you could hit subscribe, rate and review this podcast, it really, really goes a long way. I really appreciate it. All right, back to the conversation. I love that you articulated in that way because I grew up, my family's Sierra Leonean, and we went to Sierra Leone all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
And I think that was my saving grace in understanding my worth. And so I had a conversation earlier today where the woman was like, "You have such a high sense of worth." And I was like, "That's so interesting." Because she was talking about worth versus self-confidence. And I was like, even when I struggled with self-confidence, I always had a high sense of worth. And
Mm.
I really attribute that to my parents taking us back to Sierra Leone all the
Mm.
time. So I had a counter narrative to what I was facing in the States that confused me, quite frankly,
Yeah.
because I had this cocoon that surrounded me. So even when we weren't in Africa, in Maryland, growing up in Maryland, I grew up around a whole Sierra Leonean culture as a child, and really the only thing was going to school was where I like had American culture, but you crossed the
Right.
threshold in my house and you were in an
Right.
African house.
Right. Right.
Like
Right. Right.
everything was like cultural, like
Yeah.
on the weekends doing family things. So
Yeah.
I just love how you articulated that because that was my normal. And so I've never considered breaking that down in terms of the identity piece to
Yeah.
it, because that's always kind of been my normal. And I love that you are having such a rich and fruitful experience. And I think that hopefully it's piquing an interest in other people to, even if it's not moving, to really making it a point to go visit,
Oh, for
you know?
sure. And I think like you don't have to live to be connected. And I think that's another
Right.
big piece. It's not a zero sum game.
Right. Yeah. And
Mhm.
if Sierra Leone had better infrastructure, if the
Mhm.
government was a little bit more
Yeah.
together, we would, I mean, especially now being an entrepreneur, like I would spend months and months there. Like I
Right.
wouldn't, we, my whole family would be going back and forth
Right.
half the year there, half the year
Yep.
in the States for sure. I want to
Yeah.
talk about you being an educator.
Yes.
First, kindergarten teacher,
Hmm.
third and fourth grade, and then in
Yes.
administration and vice
Hmm.
principal.
Yes.
Um, what did that? Tell me about that experience. You're just so funny about talking about your about time in the school because you were doing the Lord's work, right? And there is so much expectation, especially as a Black female teacher, that you just need to give back. You were in underserved communities. What was that
Yes.
experience really like for you?
Well, I mean, it was, I would say, um, they were there were lots of experiences that helped me understand. There's this concept, I'll say it this way. There's this concept that Melissa Harris Perry talks about in her book, Sister Citizen, where this concept of standing up straight in a crooked room, where I feel like working in the education system, it's like a gauntlet. And I've never watched Game of Thrones or anything like that, but I felt like it was just some type of, test, an odyssey. And I got to the end. At least I've decided it was going to end. And I think that I loved my students. I loved my kids. I enjoyed them. I loved teaching them. I liked bothering them. I liked doing all of it. And I loved some of the parents, not all. And the reason I say that honestly,
Right.
is because what it showed me was the school became a place where you got to see so much of America's dysfunction when it comes to
Mhm.
poverty, race, gender. And being a Black woman in power, how people perceive Black women in power and their level of comfort or discomfort with someone that had confidence and had conviction to make difficult decisions to change some of the systems and structures that were working against a lot of the families and a lot of the teachers. And I ended up for a while feeling extremely isolated in some of the work that I did because I made a lot of people uncomfortable because of how I evaluated teaching. I had high expectations, like we should, because the students in the classroom, the parents send their best stuff to school, which were their kids. And so I had high expectations about the quality of teaching because we knew that there are lots of different studies that show that how fourth grade students do well and
Mhm.
fare on exams allows you to have a trajectory for where they would be in relation to the prison system. Overall, I think that there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot that has been done with these systems. But I do think that these systems also have a way of harming the people that are trying to help. I do think that because of my time with education and some of the experiences that I had to go to therapy because of just the level of pressure and the level of, I would say, disregard in some ways for the emotional well-being of the leaders as caretakers for these
Mhm.
communities. I found that I had to ultimately choose myself, and luckily I had an out, which was the Frugal Feminista. And luckily, I had therapy, which allowed me to have another way to heal as I was still working through, also trying to help the community. But I do think that even though it was a generally a positive experience, I often think that the systems in place will continue to turn out people and harm them in ways that could be avoided if we're able to, like I said, holistically attend to all constituencies, the children, the families, the staff, and then the structures will follow and ensue.
100%. I was a education reporter, so I was in schools all the time. Teachers are among my favorite
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
but it just was like the adults always make things harder than they
Yes.
really should be. And it
Yes.
just, the further and further you get away from the care of the kids, the more dysfunctional things became. And,
Yeah.
so much of the policies really are not centering children, they're centering the adults and their
Yes.
feelings.
Yeah.
But in the trajectory of your career, was
Mm-hmm.
that harm that you were enduring while trying to do good?
Mm-hmm.
You're out here trying to do good, but you're receiving harm. Is
Right.
that kind of what had you start building the Frugal Feminista?
In the
Or
I would say yes. I mean, no,
mm,
it wasn't what started, is what fueled it. So I started the Frugal Feminista because I didn't know how to pay back my student loans. And I started writing a blog spot to asking people, did you know too? Like, because I didn't know. And so
yeah.
it was just sharing with my friends. And then once I started to experience that harm, I had to put my energy into something. And I guess I couldn't articulate it then, but it was my way out. I saw
Mhm.
that there were other people that were somehow able to monetize this particular passion of theirs. And I just kind of stuck with it. There were times when I was like, I wasn't sure. Like I said, it wasn't making money, but I stuck with it. And I think that once I started to be paid and once I started to see more consistent payments and collaborations, I knew that if I just put more effort into it, it would be my way out. And it became just my lifesaver at the end that allowed me to shift. Because I think that had I not, I would still be either maybe looking for something else to do. But I think ultimately the Frugal Feminista allowed me to really step into who I am, which is I think I am still a healer. I think I still am a leader, but I need a little bit more freedom and flexibility to do with it in a way and in the forms and in the methods that I wanted to.
We're seeing teachers leave in droves now
Yes.
after COVID and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So let's set the stage, okay? You are out here, you're teaching the children, you're
Right.
doing the Lord's work. You got all these loans that you're like, wait a
Right.
minute.
Right.
They thought that giving an 18-year-old all this,
Right,
18 to
right,
22-year-old,
right,
allowing this person who does not have any credit to borrow
right,
all this money, that they're going to know how to navigate it once the
right,
time comes when the education is over. You're like, wait a minute, why do they
yeah,
keep emailing me? And
right.
then you start and then you start Frugal Feminista at the
Mhm.
same time. You're trying to figure a lot of things out at the same time.
Right.
And it was called Girl Get Your Life Together first.
Yes, it was a nod to Glenda Bridgeforth, who wrote Girl Get Your Money Straight. And it was like one of the first books I ever read about personal finance, when I found out probably a few hours before that there was such a thing called personal finance.
Mhm.
And I read that book and read her series of books and was completely inspired. And it was started as a blog spot sharing with my girlfriends.
Yeah. And so so you were doing it just to create community then, just to see, to, I'm trying to figure this out. This is what I'm learning and this is what I'm sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where the idea came up afterwards for me to start writing, but even in college, I've always loved writing. So it's kind of
Mhm.
clear I just wanted to create a platform. In college, I used to be the editor in chief of the Black Literary Magazine. So this was another form of me just sharing. And I just started to write. And then I said, hey, what if I pitch to a newspaper to have a column about personal finance? And I pitched it to a local Brooklyn based um, Our Time Press, which is black owned, and they said sure. So I think they paid me $50 an article, and I remember getting the email that he said yes, and running through the hallways of my school. It was after hours, and I had a good friend who was my teacher mate. We both love writing. I used to take creative writing classes, and I shared that with her, and I think that's where it started to spark that. This $50 was
Mm.
like $1 million to me, that someone liked my ideas, and then it started to grow from there.
Right. And so how were you able to just monetize that platform and then create
Mhm.
this robust community? Because I think a lot of teachers, I mean, we see teachers as like, we, when we were coming up, we're like, oh, they have summer break just like we do. But no, now teachers, the costs are so high. They're going and they have second jobs and they're going, to work someplace else to make ends meet. How this is something that so many people can implement, because a lot of people are like, I'm not launching into entrepreneurship. I really would like a side hustle because I just like a little bit of extra money for vacations or my, retirement or my
Yeah.
child's, college. How are you able to make it to where it was something that could provide you substantial income, especially as you're trying to work through paying off debt?
Well, I would say that in the beginning it didn't. In the beginning, like I said,
Hmm.
it was $50 here. But what I did was I stayed consistent with writing blog posts, and I would share them consistently. And then after that, I just started to share them to other people, just like my whole email list of friends, like, you guys need to read this. And what I would do also was I would reach out to other women who were doing personal finance at that time and say, hey, kind of, do you want to be my friend, kind of thing? Like, can we do something
Hmm.
together? Can I meet up with you? And that started to build community at the creator level, where even to
Mm.
this day, I'm still in touch with some of those women. And that was also helpful. But in terms of monetizing it, I became a writer for a larger site. They reached out to me because I guess of the consistency and the quality of the blog post. And that person became a mentor to me. And that person began to teach me how to actually monetize the content from the blog. So what I learned how to do early on was to create products. So teachers think that the only thing that they can do is teach. Well, actually, those are very transferable skills. That means you could speak. That means you can write curriculum. That means that you're able to distill large ideas into bite sized pieces. You create things that are actionable for people to do. You have these ideas around being able to guide people to think about their thinking. A lot of people can't do that, but teachers can,
Mhm.
or good teachers, I should say, can. And even if you
Mhm.
were to look at your rubric of how you're evaluated and look at how in New York City they use the Danielson model of, teacher self-assessment. It's a tool that can be used for self-assessment or to help evaluate you. If you look at the highly developed or highly effective column, you'll see that there are ways and manners in which someone can see if people actually get the learning, and if
Mhm.
teachers are able to apply that to a particular passion that they have. So say, for example, you're a teacher, but you're the teacher that's super organized, or you're the teacher that's lost 20 pounds, or you're the teacher that is able to advocate on behalf of the grade team. If you're the teacher that is able to be the most fashionable, you can take all the things you've learned as a pedagogue and then apply it to a new set of content. And the same way that you create lesson plans and PowerPoint presentations, they'll just become decks, right? In
Mhm.
the world of corporate, or you can do fintech or ed tech, or things like that. But if you're just trying to create the side hustle, those become your first products. So rather than a lesson plan, you put a bunch of lesson plans together, that becomes a PDF. That's a guide that you can sell
Mhm.
between X amount and X amount. And if you're deciding how much money you want to make a month, you can decide to take that same PDF, and make it a presentation where you do it live virtually. So then that's another price point. And then after you do that live virtually, you can do group coaching, which is another price point. And if after that, you can do one on one. So you can take the same concept that you have been admired for, have been awarded for, and to take the same skills of being a teacher, of teaching and breaking things down and speaking and making connections and building community in the classroom and making people feel seen and heard, and then applying it to these various containers of various values or perceived values. So I can even share with my book, Heal Your Relationship with Money. It's a book that can be bought at a particular price point, and then that book has become the source of the creation of a course, which is another price point. And
Mhm.
then that course has that same concept has been um, morphed or leveled into group coaching, and then I do presentations with corporations, and then it becomes a training for corporate clients, the same concept in different formats. And then there you have your ability to take something that is small, that's passion that you love, apply the skills that you have, and then make the extra money.
Game, all of it. Game for anybody
Mhm.
in any industry, anywhere,
Mhm.
complete game. Because that's what I'm trying to apply to my life
Yes.
right now, and
Yes.
creating products around things that you completely take for granted
Yep.
because you're in a space where everybody has similar skill sets. So you don't think it's special. But when you go to a space where it's outside of that industry, people are like, wow, they really
Yep.
value, what you bring to the table. So
Mhm.
don't take your skills for granted.
For
I
sure.
do want to, because I want to be mindful of your time. Like, I do want to talk about you paying off your debt, and how you had to address your money mindset. I heard you say that basically the 7-year-old self was making financial decisions for
Mm.
you well into your adulthood. And we've
Yes.
talked about money narratives here on the podcast, and talk to me about how you really had to how that showed up for you and how you had to address it.
Well, I mean, a lot of us have a young self that may be guiding some of our financial decisions. And depending on how that child was poured into, it may be a good thing or may not be healthy, I would say, or helpful, even better. And so I would say that in getting out of debt, see, the getting out of debt was difficult because I didn't want to pay it back. So that's one, the scarcity of just like there not being enough, right? I don't
Right,
want to pay
right.
back the money. There's not enough. If I give that to them, then there won't be more. I mean, that was essentially
Mhm.
what it was. I was resentful and salty about having to pay or repay, even though technically I had signed. But then going to the into the weeds of was it fair and all those other kind of things.
It's
But
wild though. Like, if
right,
we
it
really
is
like
wild.
are going to be honest, like
Yeah,
none of us knew what we
no,
were
no,
signing,
no.
and nobody bothered to explain it,
Explain, no,
and the companies didn't feel a
no,
responsibility. So you are literally
right,
signing to have tens of thousands of dollars of
right,
debt when you are 17 and 18
right.
years old. Is
Yeah.
wild.
And even more equal side note is that on campus, they give you credit cards and you don't know. And so in addition to my student loan debt, I had credit card debt because back in the day there was Columbia House Records. I'm not sure if anyone's old enough for that.
I
And you
remember
got your 12
that.
for a dollar and
Yes.
or a penny, and then it ballooned up into like 24 each per CD. If anyone not certificates of deposit in terms of money, CDs, that's how we used to listen to music, y'all. And just,
Everybody who's listening, it's like usually 35 up.
oh, okay, they know,
So
they know.
they should know. They should
Right, right,
know.
right. Because I'm a money person, but now I'm talking music. And so just this whole idea of the scarcity came in even when, ironically, I think that's a big piece that I talk about, is that scarcity is sometimes related to the amount of money that you have, but sometimes it's not. And so once I was able to get out of debt, and I can share the various ways, I was Mickey Mouse at birthday parties. I did all the side hustles. I was security. I worked security at my friend's flea market table. I made sure no one stole anything. I did like 10-minute extra minutes when I was a teacher. I used to read books to the first graders before school started. I just did a lot of different things. And so I also was able to get a higher paying job because I was also getting my second master's as an organizational leadership. And so getting out of debt was facilitated by being able to have more money, and getting very, I was also very fearful of being in debt once I figured out that this debt was keeping me from having my own money. And
Mm-hmm.
so I worked through paying off debt, but the scarcity mindset of still not having enough really hit home once I had zero debt and I was still fearful of never having enough. So a lot of us work for these very coveted positions in terms of having more than you need, being able to buy what you want. But there was this deeper fear in me of feeling like I'm always going to be at a loss. And I started to hoard money for a while, thinking that I'm never going to have enough. And so the question around mindset in relation to scarcity, when you the numbers actually are in the negative, are are valid, that it feels like because I have this weight of owing people that it may always feel this way, it will always be like that. And the response to that I have is a very typical, is a very simple practical one, I would say, in terms of one, understanding that rewriting it to say that this is a temporary situation, and if I do these things over a course of time, I'll be able to eliminate my debt in this amount of time. So if it's like $20,000 worth of debt and you give yourself 40 months, what is that? $500 a month, and then $500 a month divided by 4 weeks, that's $125 if I'm doing my numbers right. So
Mm-hmm.
$125 a week, where can I find that? If you have that mindset of like everything's going to work out, all I need is $125 this week, I can take it from possibly these four places. So it makes it even smaller, the goal. You're
Mm-hmm.
able to get out of debt with that particular mindset. Now, if you have a scarcity mindset and you're making more than enough money, it's a little bit different because the numbers are there. Clearly, you have the wealth. So it's not the numbers, it's something else. And I think the work is to get the support to help you understand what has money been, how has the messaging around money and safety and risk or pleasure been communicated to you. And I think that's where a lot of the work is, where a lot of the hidden harm is often overlooked because the numbers show you should be happy or you should be content or you should be well adjusted. But we look into the ways in which it was messaged, or the ways in which we saw examples of maybe people who made money but then were isolated or excluded in their family or talked about. It may make you feel like, um, I shouldn't maintain this wealth, or I should find ways to get rid of it, or people who hoarded money and always complained there was never enough. No matter, in a similar case, no matter how much you have, you'll always be in the same habit and routine of complaining because that's what you were taught. So to those people, it's really unpacking the same story and finding examples of when you want to purchase something, to what extent is this purchase going to lead me to abject poverty? It probably won't if you look at the numbers. Like, to what extent is it actually true that this is going to happen if this happens, and find the opposite to support the counterpoint. So I think it's just being able to manage, negotiate those different feelings with the financial facts helps you really see where you are on that scarcity continuum in relation to how much you have.
Yeah, and that's why it's like all those people are like, you can't go get a cup of coffee
Right.
because somehow this one cup of coffee is just
Right.
going to bankrupt you.
Right.
It's like the
Right.
math doesn't even math,
No.
you know? Um, but and I'm so glad, everybody who comes on here and talks about money, because that's the thing is that I don't want it to be airy fairy about like designing your life.
Right.
You have to have money to design your life.
For
Like
sure.
it requires money. And I feel like a lot of money conversations talk about like, put your money in this investment and that investment. And yes, those things are important. But more than anything, especially if you're coming from a marginalized group, it's your mindset. It's your mindset around money because of
Yeah.
what we have been exposed to, right?
Right.
And so even though you developed great habits and practices, what was the mindset work that you had to do so you can enjoy this moment that you're in right now? So you could even like move to Africa. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Right.
you have to have a certain mindset to be able to do this.
Right. I mean, I think that I got support. I mean, I had a therapist. Um, I was in therapy for years, helping me process some trauma that maybe because it wasn't as big as maybe say someone who's had like a physically abusive parent that you can actually see the scars, but the other
Mhm.
types of ways that harm is done in, like, Maya Angelou talks about death by a thousand cuts, right? Like
Mhm.
those types of harms, and they little by little wither away. So I would say, to answer your question, it was having a therapist. I also went to deal with like other issues that came up in terms of I went to a food coach. I had group coaching around body image. Like everything was related. So I used my money, to answer your question, to invest in supports to free me holistically. So I invested in being well, right? So my wellness became a priority. I aligned my spending to that. I aligned, not just my habits, but how I spent my time to the things that I wanted to get better and improve upon, and then invested in the support. So I had a personal trainer at one time. I had a nutritionist and a therapist. I was worked on. Do you know what I mean? So it
Mm.
helped me really begin to um, get to the heart of how can I change it. It's like I worked on myself holistically, and that's where the mindset piece comes from, because it's not really about the money. It's about your relationship with a lot of different things. Like, can I actually have what I want? Well, you can with help. Can I have the thoughts that I want? Can I even have the relationship with food in my body that I want? Can I have the relationships that I want? And so investing in the areas where you find that you want to improve is going to automatically have you start looking at other areas that you want to improve. And just by the fact that you're improving in general, you're going to probably have some positive changes in your finances or how you view your finances.
I didn't even recognize that until I thought I was making a decision about work, and then it
Mm,
blew up my entire life. I just thought I could keep it in a little thing over here. But
right.
once you start examining something, um, then you have to apply that same critical thinking to every single area of your life. And then
Yes.
everything is on the table.
Yes.
So thank you for putting it in that way. I mean, I've never thought about it in that way, but thank you for putting it really in that way.
Right.
And also, when people are trying to like gain wealth or pay off debt, they usually don't spend money, but they don't understand that they are their first investment.
Mm,
Like you
yeah.
are your first and best investment. And so I just really love how you say, okay, I went to therapy and I got a, trainer, and I
Mhm.
and I also paid for this other coach,
Right.
everybody needs a squad.
For sure.
Everybody needs a squad. So our last segment is called Act Up, ECT. Those are my initials. And I'm trying to think of how to frame this now, because this is a little bit different than I thought it was going to be in the best way
Oh, yeah.
possible.
Okay.
But I guess for people who are listening to all of this and they just don't know where to start,
Mhm.
they have a block, whether it's financial, whether it's
Right.
mental, whether it's not really liking where they are in their career and they need to go somewhere else, or they just know that they need to make a decision, they need to make a change? What are some things they could do today to kind of propel them in that positive direction?
That's such a good question. And it's a hard question because it just is. But I would say that I would take I would take one area that I'm doing well in, even if it's not well, if it's better than the other areas, right?
Mhm.
And identify what you've done well, right? So even if that means you've gotten out of bed and you've been able to, like, say, make your bed and just get through your routines, what about having been able to succeed at those small tasks? What are some of the attributes of success that you can maybe apply to that one area of your life that is the one that's struggling? And I would even argue that maybe you can look for the area where maybe you're not struggling the most, but you're just struggling, and apply it to that because you may get an easier win, and then attack the most difficult area after you've had some established wins in some of those other areas that you improved upon. Because depending on how you want to domino or snowball your emotional strength, sometimes you need to get off on the top of the hill. You need to get up a little bit before you're able to really have some momentum to get to that harder task. And it's not avoidance, it's strategy. So you're first doing identifying what you're good at, applying it to the areas that you want to improve upon that can get you a couple quick wins, and then that confidence will help you apply the confidence and the actual strategy to the areas that you need the most support around.
And just one last thing, what is the money lesson that was the hardest for you to learn or implement?
I think for me, it's that it's safe to be generous.
Say more.
What I mean by that is I grew up being taught to hoard, right? And so hoarding is the opposite of generosity. So whether it be hoarding time, hoarding love, hoarding um, validation, right? But because somehow in letting some of it go, it meant that it was diminishing what you had.
Yeah.
And so in another way, I would say there's more where that came from, right? So this idea that I have an endless supply of abundance, which allows me to say it's safe to be generous because I'll never be depleted if I believe that I have an endless source of abundance. And I think that has allowed me to say yes to things, to say no to things with confidence either way. Yeah, so I would say that, and that kind of applies to a lot of different areas of your life.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Amazing. Kara, how can we support you and
Mhm.
stay in contact with you?
You can support me by one, staying in touch on the Frugal Feminista. You can go to the site, you can download. We have a whole bunch of wonderful resources to help you heal your relationship with money. I also have Heal Your Relationship with Money, the book. It's out to support you to really go deeper into the conversation that we just had about how to really begin to understand how I feel about money, and also decide, is that how I want to feel about money forever or for now? And that is available on Amazon, and also at heal your relationship with money.com. And yeah, I think those are the best ways. And just stick in my universe and join my email list, because I always try and share resources and supports to anyone that wants to be a part of our community.
Fantastic. And you, gems on gems on gems on gems. So many things to take away. Kara, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad we're connected too. I
Yes,
really
thank you
appreciate it.
so much for yeah, it was just like girl talk when we had the
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, it was
I
wonderful.
love it. I love it. Thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing with Andrea Cline-Thomas, a Mountain Court Media production. The music was written, recorded, and produced by Gavin Casey, also known as Dark Purple. Now, if you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and write a comment on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to share it with friends. Now, I hope this episode helps you on your journey. See you next time.